All right, let's just jump right in. Today, we're tackling two absolute giants, two worldviews that shape the lives of billions of people: capitalism and Buddhism. Now, you might think they operate in completely separate worlds, right? But what if their core ideas aren't just different? What if they're fundamentally at war with each other? And that brings us to the big question for this whole explainer. Is it even possible to climb the ladder in a system that's all about getting more, about self-interest, while at the same time walking a spiritual path that's all about letting go, about non-attachment, about dissolving the self? The sources we're digging into today make a pretty bold claim. The answer is a hard no. And this quote, wow, it just lays it all out there, doesn't it? It's not saying it's tough or a bit of a challenge. It's saying it's impossible, that these two paths are literally pointing in opposite directions. So let's unpack why the source material feels so strongly about this. Okay, first up, what the source calls a paradox of success. The whole conflict here isn't just about, what you do with your paycheck. It goes way deeper. It's about how you even define a successful life, and maybe even reality itself. Now, ontological opposition. That sounds like a real mouthful, I know. But the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. It just means that the two systems are built on totally conflicting ideas about what's real. What one system sees as the solid foundation for everything, the other sees as a complete delusion. It's a fundamental clash over the very nature of being. So, to get a handle on the capitalist side of this fight, the source suggests we look at it through a pretty provocative lens, viewing modern capitalism as a kind of secular cult. And it's really important to get this. This isn't meant to some kind of insult. It's more of a structural analysis. The idea is that the core beliefs of the system, like, say, the need for endless growth, are so baked into our culture that we don't even see them as beliefs anymore. They just feel like, well, reality. It's like the water that a fish swims in. It's everywhere, so you don't even notice it. So how does this cult keep its hold? Well, the source uses a framework called the BITE model. First, there's behavior, which is controlled through rituals, like the 80-hour workweek. Then there's information. You manage that by making alternative systems seem crazy or dangerous, and by keeping key data, like wage gaps, kind of quiet. Third is thought. This is shaped by getting us to idolize the super rich and, subtly blame the poor for their situation. And finally, emotion, which is controlled by using one of the most powerful motivators out there, the absolute fear of going broke. And what do you get for playing the game? Well, the system offers its own kind of salvation, its own version of enlightenment, a sort of material nirvana, where the promise is that if you just get enough money, enough stuff, you can buy permanent happiness, total security, and freedom from all your worries. Okay, so that's the one side of the argument. Now, let's flip the coin and look at the Buddhist worldview, which, according to our sources, comes in like a wrecking ball to the very foundations of that whole structure we just talked about. And that wrecking ball has a name: anatta. It's the doctrine of non-self, and this one single idea launches a direct assault on the most basic, fundamental assumption that capitalism needs to even work. And this just lays out the clash so perfectly. For capitalism to function, you absolutely have to have a stable, persistent I, an I that can own a house, sign a contract, invest in a stock. I mean, without that, the entire idea of ownership just falls apart. But then Buddhism comes along and says that this permanent I that you're so attached to, well, that's the main illusion you have to see through to be free. There is no permanent owner, just a constant flow of thoughts and feelings. This is where it gets super specific and really interesting. In Buddhism, the path to enlightenment means breaking these 10 chains or fetters that bind you to suffering. And the argument here is that to be a success in capitalism, you have to do the exact opposite. You have to make those chains stronger. You have to build up your sense of I to have a strong identity. You have to chase after wealth to satisfy your desires. And you have to compete, often ruthlessly, which can get in the way of universal compassion. You see the problem? The goals are completely, diametrically opposed. So this conflict isn't just something happening inside our heads. The sources argue it has massive, real-world consequences. And it reframes our whole idea of economic growth into something that looks a lot like, well, theft. The first kind of theft is what's called temporal theft. Think of it this way. Our current economic gains aren't just magically created out of thin air. Instead, we're basically taking out a massive loan from the future. Or, to be blunt, we're stealing from it. We're burning through resources, piling up debt, and wrecking the climate that future generations are going to have to live with. And the second kind is ecological theft. This points out that our economic spreadsheets are just way too narrow. Our profits and our GDP growth, they don't factor in the enormous costs that we're pushing onto the planet. The forests we chop down, the species that go extinct, the ecosystems that fall apart just so we can make a buck. It's a zero-sum game where our win is the biosphere's loss. So what is it that's driving this entire cycle of accumulation and theft? The analysis now zooms back in, away from the huge systemic view, and down into our own psychology to find the little engine that's powering this whole machine. And that engine is called an inner deficit, or inner poverty. This is that deep, nagging feeling inside of us of just not having enough. That sense of lack, of fear, of being incomplete that we try to fix by grabbing for things on the outside. More money, higher status, more possessions. And here it is. This is the big aha moment of the whole argument. This psychological inner deficit that drives the entire capitalist machine is the exact same thing that Buddhism identified 2,500 years ago and called tanha. The thirst, the craving, the relentless desire that it says is the root cause of all our suffering. It's two different names for the exact same human driver. This quote just reframes everything so powerfully. From this point of view, having $1 trillion isn't a sign that you've won the game. It's the ultimate symptom of that inner deficit, a frantic, desperate, and ultimately hopeless attempt to fill a hole inside you that can never be filled with things from the outside. And there's this amazing metaphor for this state of being, the hungry ghost. It's a creature that's always starving, driven by that inner lack. Its ambition comes from a place of feeling incomplete. And it's all propped up by illusions of its own self-importance, which lets it believe that it's special and deserves to take more than its fair share from everyone else. So, after laying all of this out, the deep-down conflict, the impact on the planet, the psychology that drives it, the argument concludes that we are left with two very clear and very, very different paths to choose from. And so we land at this incredibly stark choice. On one path, you have capitalist success, building up the self, gathering external things, all powered by that engine of craving. On the other path, you have Buddhist success, taking apart the self to find true freedom inside by, you guessed it, getting rid of that exact same craving. According to this line of thinking, they're not just different goals. One is the complete and total undoing of the other. And that leaves us with one last vital question to think about. When you see this profound conflict laid out, how do you measure wealth? Is it really about what you have in your bank account? Or is it about the internal feeling of having enough? The answer to that, according to this analysis, really defines which path you're actually walking.